2 days before my wedding, my fiancé slapped me in front of a room full of people because of a dare. So I called off the engagement, married his billionaire cousin instead, while he watches from afar, finally realizing he lost the woman he never deserved. The last time I wore white in public, it was supposed to be for a wedding, not a funeral. But as I stood in the boutique, the veil pinned just above my temple, watching the silk of my dress shimmer beneath warm spotlights, my phone buzzed with a message that would bury the version of me that ever thought this was love. Savannah, can you come to the club? It's a surprise. Logan. No explanation. No detail. Just an invitation sent hours before our joint bachelor party. 2 days before the wedding. Till I smiled. Logan was always dramatic. Filmin. Maybe it was a proposal reenactment, something to post online and get the couple goals crowd swooning. I should have known better. When I arrived at the rooftop lounge, the music was blaring and Logan was already a few drinks in, surrounded by his groomsmen and a crowd of people I barely recognized. Aubrey West was there too. Of course she was. The first girl he ever loved. The one who left the country in high school, then returned last month as if the world had been waiting for her to reclaim her spot. She was sitting on the arm of Logan's chair, her laughter too loud, her hand too familiar on his shoulder. And then someone shouted, "Time for the final dare." The music cut. I froze by the entrance, just outside the ring of attention. Logan stood up, wobbled slightly and gave a crooked smile. "Truth or dare?" someone called. "Dare," Logan said lazily. A chorus of cheers. Drunken laughter. Then a voice rang out from the group, unmistakably Aubrey's. "I dare you to slap your fiancé." The room erupted. Gasps. Laughter. And then someone shouted, "Come on, Logan, do it for the laugh." He hesitated. My heart dropped into my heels. He looked around, flushed from alcohol and adrenaline. "Come on, it's a joke," someone added. One little slap. And then he turned. Saw me. And with a dazed, drunken half-smirk walked right toward me. I didn't move. Not because I was frozen, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go. He stopped inches from my face. "Save," he said, sounding almost sheepish. "It's just a dare." Then he lifted his hand. The slap wasn't hard, but it was loud. Public. The kind of sound that echoes off stone and sticks to the inside of your ears. I didn't touch my face. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him. And I smiled. Then I turned to the stunned crowd and said, voice calm and cutting, "Well, I suppose that's the last dare he'll ever complete for me." Then I walked out. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. I went home. I opened the closet. And I stared at the wedding dress for a long moment before calmly picking up a pair of shears. Slice by slice, I shredded it until nothing remained but fabric ruins on the floor. Then I picked up the phone and called my father. "Activate the Carter Alliance," I said. He was quiet on the other end. "Are you sure?" "I'll marry Ethan," I said. "Make the arrangements. I'm not backing out again." The next morning the headlines exploded. Savannah Blake slapped by fiancé during dare, wedding in jeopardy. Carter Alliance rumors stirring, Ethan Carter returning to the States? Was it just a game or something deeper? But Logan still thought it was a joke. That I'd come back. He texted me. "You know I didn't mean it. Come on, Savannah. Don't make a scene." And then, "Fine. Be mad. We'll talk after your tantrum is over." He thought I was throwing a fit. But I wasn't throwing anything. I was rearranging the entire board. By evening, I had signed the paperwork to transfer ownership of the wedding house. My assistant handled the sale discreetly. I didn't want Logan even stepping into what would have been our marital home. Let him watch it become someone else's. Ethan arrived the next day. I hadn't seen him in 2 years. The last time he was sitting quietly at a holiday dinner while Logan made jokes at my expense. Ethan had watched. Said nothing. But when our eyes met back then, I remembered one thing. He never looked away. Now, standing at the arrivals terminal, he approached with that same quiet intensity. "Savannah," he greeted. "Ethan," I said. "Are you okay?" "No," I said, "but I will be." He nodded. "So, you're really going through with this?" I looked him square in the eyes. "Would you?" He didn't even blink. "I already said yes to your father. But I'm saying yes for myself too." I stared at him. "Why?" He smiled faintly. Because I've always thought Logan was an idiot. That night, Logan showed up outside my apartment banging on the door. I didn't answer. He left 15 missed calls and 24 texts. It was just a game. I didn't hit you that hard. You're seriously throwing away 5 years over one stupid dare? You won't find anyone better than me. And finally, you'll regret this. I didn't respond to any of them. I simply stared at the ring I had removed from my finger. Then I flushed it down the toilet. I'd always imagined the man who picked up the shattered pieces of my life would arrive in shining armor, probably on a horse, definitely with a vow to avenge me. Instead, he arrived in a charcoal suit, carrying nothing but a carry-on and a quiet kind of certainty. Ethan Carter didn't knock twice. He stood outside my father's estate that morning like he belonged there, calm, tall, and composed, completely unshaken by the chaos unfolding behind my closed doors. Logan's slap had become the talk of Southbridge. Every social circle, every brunch table, every whisper between wine glasses began with, "Did you hear what he did to Savannah?" It would have humiliated me. But I refused to let it. Because I had already decided. I would not be the woman who waited around for an apology that never came. I would be the woman who replaced him. "You look different," Ethan said as I walked into my father's study to greet him. I was dressed in white again. But this time it wasn't soft satin. It was a crisp ivory suit, tailored sharp enough to cut. "Is that a compliment or an observation?" I asked, arching a brow. He smirked faintly. "Both." I took the seat across from him and crossed my legs, folding my hands in my lap. "Let's get something straight. I'm not looking for romance. Not now. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Understood. And I'm not here to play games, Ethan. This marriage would be a business decision. For the family. For legacy." He nodded. "That's what arranged marriages used to be. Doesn't mean it can't become more." I blinked. "Are you saying you want it to be more?" There was a pause. His expression didn't change, but his voice lowered slightly. "I'm saying it could be. If you let it." Before I could respond, my father walked in. "You two look like a deal is being signed," he joked, shaking Ethan's hand. "I've spoken with the Carters. They're on board. You'd both be stronger together than apart." Ethan stood. "Then let's make it official." The next day we held a press conference. No cameras. Just a few reputable outlets and a carefully worded joint statement. After thoughtful reflection, Savannah Blake and Logan Pierce have mutually decided to call off their wedding. Ms. Blake will now be engaged to Ethan Carter, her longtime family ally and friend. The wedding will proceed as scheduled. Logan must have read it the moment it went live. His call came in 5 minutes later. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened a bottle of champagne. Ethan poured us each a glass. "To bold decisions," he said. "To replacements," I replied. But in my heart, I knew this wasn't about replacing Logan. It was about reclaiming myself. That evening, I arrived at the photography studio for our wedding shoot. Yes, we kept the date, the location, even the floral themes. It was no longer about Logan. It was about rewriting the narrative. The moment I stepped onto the set, everything paused. Because Logan was already there. Standing with her. Aubrey. Her hand curled in the crook of his arm like it belonged there. They were dressed in matching colors. Him in black and silver, her in a champagne-colored dress, looking like an afterthought version of me. He turned the second he saw me. And smirked. "Savannah," he said mockingly, "didn't know this place allowed walk-ins." Aubrey giggled and leaned closer to him. "She's here alone?" Logan tilted his head. "No fiancé today?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because right then the door opened behind me and Ethan walked in, every bit the opposite of Logan. Calm, controlled. Elegant in a navy tuxedo with a silver tie that matched mine. He walked to me without hesitation, gently took my hand and kissed the back of it. "Sorry I'm late," he said softly. "Traffic." I looked up at him with a small smile. "You're right on time." Logan's expression twisted. "You're really doing this?" Ethan turned to him. "She is." Aubrey clutched Logan's arm tighter. Looks like someone was desperate to make a point. Ethan glanced at her. And some people are desperate to stay relevant. Logan stepped forward. "You think you can just walk into my life and take my fiancé?" Ethan stepped forward, matching his energy without raising his voice. "You slapped her in front of 50 people and thought she'd still show up in white for you." Logan scoffed. That was a game. No, Ethan interrupted. That was your character showing. I took a slow step forward and faced Logan directly. You want to know what the real slap was, Logan? It wasn't your hand on my cheek. It was the moment I realized I loved someone who thought that was acceptable. His jaw clenched. But Ethan gently tugged my hand. Let's take our photos, Mrs. Carter-to-be. As the flashbulbs lit the room, I didn't even have to fake the smile. With every click, every frame captured of Ethan's steady hand on my waist, of me laughing freely for the first time in months, I felt lighter. Like I was being recorded not as a bride recovering from heartbreak, but as a woman walking straight into power. Later that night, Ethan drove me to his family's villa, our new home. When I stepped inside, I paused. The walls were painted in my favorite muted rose. The furniture was modern but soft. In the corner, a bookshelf held first editions of novels I loved. A teacup collection I'd once mentioned in passing, displayed in a glass cabinet. I turned to him, stunned. How? He smiled. I've been building this place for over a year. I blinked. Why? He shrugged slightly. In case you ever opened your eyes. My breath caught in my throat. Why didn't you say anything? I whispered. Because you were chasing a boy, he replied. And I wasn't going to compete with someone who treated you like an option. He stepped closer. But I was going to be ready when you finally stopped waiting to be chosen. My heart thundered in my chest. I had been broken. Now I felt seen. And the hands catching me weren't shaking. They were firm, patient, and strong enough to carry the weight of everything I thought I'd lost. I never expected the world to feel so quiet after so much noise. The wedding shoot went viral within hours. Clips of Ethan gently adjusting my veil, the soft smiles we shared, the subtle way he held my waist like I was something delicate but unbreakable. And then, the contrast. The slap. A clip had surfaced from the rooftop party. Logan's hand rising in slow motion, the sting of contact, my expression frozen in humiliation. The background laughter. Aubrey's smirk. The sound that silenced a room. 2 videos. One man who saw me as a dare. One who saw me as a woman worth building a life around. Public opinion turned swiftly. What had once been whispers of pity became collective outrage. This is abuse, not a prank. Savannah is a queen for walking away. Logan just lost the best thing that ever happened to him. For once, I didn't have to defend myself. The world did it for me. But Logan? Logan was used to winning. So when he lost control, he didn't sulk. He retaliated. The morning after the wedding shoot, I was in Ethan's study, sipping tea and browsing the final wedding registry list when my assistant came rushing in. Miss Blake, sorry Mrs. Carter-to-be, there's an issue. I lowered my mug slowly. What kind of issue? Logan just announced a wedding of his own. To Aubrey. Same date. Same time. Same venue. I blinked once. Twice. Then I laughed. A copycat wedding? I asked. He's not even pretending to be original anymore? She hesitated. There's more. I waited. He's planning to hold it at your former wedding house. My smile faded. Because that house had already been sold. Quietly. Wiggly. With every paper signed and every key turned. He can't, I said calmly. She looked at me like she wasn't so sure. I picked up my phone and dialed the new owner. 5 minutes later I hung up, perfectly composed. Have the house staged and locked, I said. Then call the press. By evening, Logan had made a fool of himself again. Dressed in a tuxedo beside Aubrey, he arrived with reporters waiting to capture their statement wedding. Except when they reached the gates, security turned them away. Sir, you no longer have access, the guard said, handing him a copy of the property title. Logan stared at the name on the deed. Ethan Carter. Purchased under his holding company. Logan's face turned red. Cameras flashed as he hissed under his breath. You set me up. The next day, we went to the same 5-star restaurant where Logan and I used to dine every anniversary. This time Ethan and I were seated at the private chef's table. And halfway through our meal Logan and Aubrey walked in. They didn't notice us at first, not until the sommelier offered them a complimentary wine upgrade, on behalf of the Carters. Logan spun around, jaw tight. Seriously? Are you following me now? I didn't bother looking up from my steak. Funny. That's what you said the night you slapped me in public. Aubrey flinched beside him. She was wearing my old favorite color, a style I used to favor, even a hairstyle I had once made my signature. She was playing dress up in my discarded skin. Logan stepped forward. You've made your point, Savannah. You married my cousin. Congratulations. Now stop interfering. I finally looked up. Logan, if I were interfering, you wouldn't even be able to afford the appetizers. He scowled and reached for his wallet. Don't test me. The waiter returned discreetly. Mr. Pierce, your card has, unfortunately, been declined. Logan froze. Another attempt. Another card. Same result. And then Ethan leaned back and said smoothly, Mr. Pierce, would you like to run a tab? Or maybe your bride would like to split the bill again. Aubrey's face flushed crimson. I'm not hungry, she said quickly, tugging Logan's arm. Let's go. But Logan didn't move. His pride had always been the loudest voice in the room. I'll fix this, he muttered, trying to call his father. No answer. He called his mother. Then his friends. No one picked up. Because news had traveled fast. Mr. Carter, the patriarch, had officially transferred the majority of the Pierce trust to Ethan. The new heir of the Carter Pierce estate was not Logan. It was me. Through Ethan. Logan turned to me, chest heaving. You think this is over? I tilted my head. It's only just begun. Later that night, I stood on the balcony of our villa, watching the stars blink softly above the city. Ethan came up behind me, wrapping an arm around my waist. You didn't have to do that, he said. I didn't do it to humiliate him, I replied. I did it to make sure he remembers what he lost. Every time he swipes a card and it says insufficient funds. He kissed the top of my head. You scare me a little. I turned to him. Do you regret marrying me? He shook his head. Not even for a second. Pause. Then he added, but if you ever slap me in public, I might consider a mild revenge. I laughed, leaning into his chest. But deep down I knew the truth. I didn't just walk away from Logan. I walked into someone who would never make me beg for dignity. There's a particular kind of satisfaction that comes from turning pain into spectacle, especially when the pain was never yours to carry in the first place. 2 weeks after my wedding to Ethan, I hosted a charity gala. The theme was New Beginnings. The guest list was elite. The menu curated. The location? The very same estate where Logan and I had originally planned our rehearsal dinner, now managed and owned under my name. And in the center of it all, encased in glass on a rotating pedestal, was a familiar object. My old engagement ring. Logan's ring. The one he gave me with a shaky voice and 100 rehearsed lines the night he proposed because our families expected it. A hollow promise disguised as commitment. The inscription inside still read, forever no matter what. I had once believed that. I wore it like armor. Now it was the crown jewel of the night's auction. The whispers began before the event even officially opened. Is that Savannah's original engagement ring? She's auctioning it? That's bold, poetic even. Reporters angled for photos. Guests sipped champagne, eyeing the glass case like it contained a relic from a war, because in a way it did. And just before the bidding began, I took the stage in a black silk gown, the neckline sharp, the silhouette commanding. Thank you all for joining me, I said into the mic. Tonight's proceeds will go to the Southbridge Women's Resilience Fund, a program that offers housing, legal counsel, and business grants to women starting over. A beat. And now, the final item of the evening. An artifact from a life I no longer belong to. The ring that once promised me forever, auctioned now for a cause that's far more lasting. The audience applauded. Some stood. And in the corner of the room, just as I expected, Logan arrived. He wasn't on the guest list. But of course that never stopped him before. He stood stiffly at the back, wearing a suit I didn't recognize, probably borrowed. His tie was askew. His hair unkempt. But his eyes, those remained sharp with something between disbelief and fury. As the auctioneer began the bidding at $10,000, Logan stepped forward. 25, he barked. The crowd turned. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. 50, said a woman near the front. Logan's eyes locked on the ring. 75. Ethan, calm as always, leaned toward me from our table. Should I outbid him? Not yet, I whispered. The numbers climbed. 90. 100. 120. And then Logan said, loud enough for the cameras to catch. 150,000. Final. The room hushed. Even the auctioneer paused. Sir, are you certain? I'm buying it back, Logan said, eyes fixed on me now. It was never meant to be anyone else's. My smile was slow, composed. I took the mic again. Unfortunately, Mr. Pierce, I said gently, this ring stopped being yours the moment you raised your hand against me. Tonight it doesn't represent love. It represents recovery. Then Ethan stood. And with a nod to the auctioneer, 200,000. The room gasped. The gavel slammed. Sold. To Ethan Carter. The cameras clicked furiously as Ethan crossed the stage, handed over the check and received the glass-encased ring. He turned to me, not Logan, and said loud enough for the press, I don't need this to prove anything. I just wanted to make sure no one else ever tried to use it to hurt you again. Then he crushed the glass case against the auction block. 1,000 gasps. And in one fluid motion he dropped the ring into the champagne bucket beside us. It belonged to a version of her that no longer exists, he said. So let's toast to who she is now. He raised his glass. I raised mine. The entire room followed. Except Logan. He was still standing, unmoving, watching the ring sink beneath the ice and bubbles like a ship going under. He tried to speak, but no words came. And when he finally turned to leave, Aubrey wasn't at his side. She hadn't come with him. Because apparently, the moment the Carter family legally cut Logan off and the statement wedding was cancelled, Aubrey found herself too busy modeling for a skincare brand in Miami. He posted a selfie that night with the caption, "Dodged a bullet nail polish." The comments were brutal. Later that night, as Ethan and I returned to the villa, he handed me something small and velvety. Another ring? I teased. He opened it to reveal a delicate platinum band. No diamond, no inscription, just a small engraved letter E intertwined with my initials. This one doesn't need a price tag, he said. It's not about the weight. It's about the meaning. I looked up at him, quiet. I'm still learning to trust again. I know, he said. That's why I won't rush you. But I will be here. Every single time you look back, I'll still be standing in the same place. Something in my chest cracked open, gently, without force. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself hope. Not for fairy tales, but for peace. The thing about arrogant men like Logan Pierce is this. They never see the fall coming because they believe they're invincible. That belief is their first mistake. Thinking I would stay silent was the second. And underestimating Ethan Carter? That was the one that broke him. After the auction, Logan disappeared from social circles. His parents issued a short, embarrassed statement about their son's indiscretion and involuntary withdrawal from the Pierce family trust. Translation: he was cut off. Legally, financially, socially. In just 2 weeks, Logan went from being the groom-to-be of the year to the cautionary tale of Southbridge. The expensive cars? Repossessed. The apartment in West Grove? Sold under his nose, because it had always been owned by the family trust. And his assistant? Hired by my foundation after she sent in a quiet resume and a polite message that read, "For what it's worth, Miss Blake, I always thought you deserved better." But Logan? He couldn't stay buried for long. Not when he had one last thing to lose. I was in the middle of a meeting with Ethan and the interior architect for our nonprofit's new headquarters when the receptionist buzzed in. "Miss Blake, Logan Pierce is in the lobby." I blinked. Ethan's hand immediately paused mid-signature. His expression didn't change, but I saw the shift. The tightening of his jaw. The subtle flicker in his eye. "I'll handle it," I said. "I'm coming with you," Ethan replied without hesitation. Logan was pacing in the marble-floored lobby, dressed in a shirt that didn't quite fit, shoes that had lost their polish, and the same entitled scowl that once passed for confidence. He turned when he saw us, voice raised before he even said hello. "You had no right." I tilted my head. "Good afternoon, Logan." "No right to?" "To destroy me," he snapped, stepping closer. Ethan moved with silent precision, placing himself just slightly in front of me. Logan's eyes flicked to him. "You think hiding behind him makes you strong?" I stepped around Ethan and met Logan's gaze directly. "No. But having someone who protects me without being asked. That makes me safe." He scoffed, bitter and broken. "You turned everyone against me. You stole my legacy. You slapped me," I replied, my voice calm and measured. "In front of 50 people. You made your choices. All I did was stop making excuses for them. Logan's hand clenched into a fist at his side. You were mine. You thought I was, I corrected. But the truth is I was just convenient. A placeholder. Until someone reminded me I could be more. Ethan finally spoke, his voice ice. You've said your piece. Now leave. But Logan didn't budge. His eyes darted across the walls, the company signage, the portraits of the women we'd helped through our charity programs. This was supposed to be ours, he muttered. I stepped forward, inches from him. No, I whispered. This was supposed to be mine. You were just too blind to see it. He tried one last jab before he left. You're going to regret this. Marrying him. The queen rising from the ashes act. You'll get tired of pretending. I didn't even blink. Logan, I'm not pretending. You were the performance. And your act is finally over. And then Ethan, with devastating timing, added, Don't worry. I'll make sure she forgets you in all the ways that matter. Logan left without another word. But I knew the cracks were widening. The next day the news broke. Logan's failed startup, the one he had been trying to save privately, had gone bankrupt. Investors backed out. His accounts were seized. Even his closest friends stopped replying to his messages. The headlines wrote themselves. Ex-heir Logan Pierce declared bankrupt. Once Southbridge's most eligible, now blacklisted. Savannah Blake's auction symbolized more than a ring. But what caught my attention most was a video clip. Leaked security footage. Logan sitting on the curb outside his old family estate, alone in the rain. No car. No umbrella. Just his soaked, crumpled self, staring up at a mansion he no longer had access to. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. And yet, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt finished. That evening, Ethan and I sat in the courtyard of our villa under a canopy of string lights, the hum of cicadas in the background. I should feel something, I said softly. Sadness. Victory. Rage. But I don't. Ethan handed me a glass of wine. That's because you're not carrying it anymore. I looked at him, quiet. You've done more for me in 2 weeks than he did in 5 years. He reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Because you were never a woman who needed saving. You just needed someone to remind you that you didn't owe your loyalty to someone who humiliated you. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Do you think he'll ever understand? I asked. No, Ethan said. And that's exactly why he lost you. It was poetic, really. The wedding venue I had once chosen with Logan, down to the flower arrangements and aisle length, was the very same one I now stood in. This time as a bride walking toward the man who would never dream of raising his hand at me. Everything was the same. And yet everything was different. This time the silence in the room wasn't heavy with doubt. It was reverent. Respectful. The guests weren't whispering about postponements or scandal. They were watching breathless as I walked in wearing white for the second time, but for the first time, on my terms. The dress was nothing like the original one. That one had been designed to fit someone else's fantasy. Plunging neckline, princess skirt, diamonds sewn into every seam. Logan had picked it, said it made me look expensive. This one. It was clean. Thick. Elegant. High neckline. Long sleeves. A trail of tiny pearl buttons down the back. No glitter, no flair, just pure, confident simplicity. The veil flowed behind me like a quiet exhale of all the things I had let go. I walked past the rows of polished chairs, lined with ivy and white orchids, toward the altar. Ethan stood waiting. He wasn't flashy in a tux. He wore a deep navy suit with a black tie and a silver pin, quiet, handsome, and resolute. And when he looked at me, he didn't just see me. He honored me. Halfway down the aisle I heard it. A ripple. A murmur. A presence. Then a sharp gasp from someone near the back row. I didn't stop walking. But I knew. He had come. Logan. I reached Ethan, took his hand and turned with him to face the officiant. But the sound of rapid footsteps echoed from the back, crashing through the quiet like thunder. Savannah. I turned slowly. There he was. Disheveled. Hollow-eyed. Suit wrinkled. No tie. He looked like a man who had slept in his car, because maybe at this point he had. Savannah, he said again, voice cracking. Please. Don't do this. The room held its breath. Even the officiant froze. Ethan didn't flinch. He simply reached across and took my hand with quiet strength. But I didn't need defending. Not this time. I stepped forward. You're embarrassing yourself, I said, my voice steady. I know, Logan croaked. I know I ruined everything. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I thought you'd wait. A tear slid down his cheek. You always waited, Savannah. Since we were 17. Since the first time I forgot a date or canceled a trip or said something cruel. You always forgave me. I thought you'd give me one more chance. I didn't move. Do you want me to lie? I asked softly. He looked stunned. What? I can lie. I can say I still feel something. That I haven't moved on. That this, I gestured at the ceremony, is all just revenge. He took a step forward, hope flickering in his eyes. But if I do that, I added coldly, I'd be comforting you, Logan. Not myself. The flicker vanished. I'm not here to perform for your guilt. I'm not here to fix what you broke. I'm not here for you. He blinked. The full weight of the moment finally hit. You're really going through with it, he whispered. I nodded. And if you ever loved me even a little, you'll sit down and watch me be chosen the way you never could. Ethan stepped beside me. I'm not asking for your blessing, he told Logan. But if you interrupt this again, I will remove you myself. Logan didn't speak. Didn't argue. Didn't beg again. He turned. And this time he walked away. I watched the doors close behind him. Then I turned back toward Ethan. The vows were simple. I had written mine days earlier. But in that moment I didn't need the script. So I spoke from the truth. I was taught that love meant sacrifice. That love meant loyalty even when it hurt. That love meant waiting. But you, Ethan, you taught me that real love never asks you to bleed to prove your worth. You saw me when I was invisible to someone else. And you waited, not for me to break but for me to choose myself. And now I choose you. His voice was deeper, rougher than usual when he spoke. I never wanted to rescue you, Savannah. I just wanted to stand beside you so you never had to face another storm alone. And if you let me, I'll keep standing here for the rest of our lives. The crowd erupted the moment we kissed. It wasn't just applause, it was relief. Like they'd been rooting for a story that finally got its happy ending after too many rewrites. We walked down the aisle hand in hand, two people who had shed every version of themselves that once begged to be loved and finally walked into something that didn't require begging at all. It required respect, commitment, and a quiet kind of fire that never demanded to be seen, but refused to go out. Later that night, when the last glass of champagne had been poured and the last camera put away, Ethan and I stood on the balcony of the private villa he'd built for this moment. Do you regret anything? He asked, his voice a low murmur against my hair. I leaned against him, looking out at the stars. Only that I didn't meet you sooner, I whispered. But then again, maybe I had to be broken to recognize the kind of love that doesn't ask you to be anything but whole. He smiled against my temple. Savannah. You look better in white when you're not trying to survive in it. I laughed. That's because this time, I'm not someone's accessory. I turned to face him fully, letting my fingers rest over his chest. This time I'm his equal. 3 days after the wedding, I was sipping coffee on the villa's sun-drenched patio when my phone buzzed with a notification. Breaking. A letter from Logan Pierce surfaces online. The words he never got to say. I stared at the screen for a moment, unmoved. It wasn't that I hadn't expected something like this. It was just so predictable. Ethan stepped outside, hair damp from a shower, rolling up the sleeves of his linen shirt. You're not smiling, he observed, placing his coffee down beside mine. I tilted the screen so he could see. He glanced, raised a brow, then set the phone face down with a calmness that made me fall in love with him all over again. Do you want to read it? He asked. I don't need to, I said. I already know what it says. Phil, it might be good to confirm. I nodded. So I opened it. It wasn't handwritten. Of course not. It was typed in an unsent email, leaked by someone suspiciously close to Logan's old PR manager. It began like a performance. Savannah, if you're reading this, it means I didn't say the right words in time. I snorted softly, already blaming the clock. I know what I did was unforgivable. I slapped you, humiliated you, chose ego over love. But you have to understand. There was but. I never thought you'd actually leave me. You were the one person who always stayed even when you shouldn't have. You forgave everything. You loved me when I didn't deserve it. And the truth is, that made me feel safe. Too safe. Like I didn't have to try anymore. I'm sorry for that. I paused. Ethan watched me carefully but said nothing. When I saw you walk down the aisle, to him, I realized what real loss feels like. It wasn't the money, or the house, or the reputation. It was knowing that the one person who truly loved me no longer did. I hope he treats you right. I hope he never makes you feel small. I hope he earns what I threw away. But if there's ever a version of the world where you need a friend, I'll always be one call away. I put the phone down. So, Ethan said quietly, was it what you expected? Yes, I replied, staring out at the horizon. It was everything he needed to say. Not what I needed to hear. By the end of the day, the letter had been reposted, analyzed, and romanticized by 100 comment sections. Maybe she should give him a second chance. People make mistakes. That's real love right there. I didn't respond. But I did notice how none of those comments came from women who'd ever been slapped in front of a room full of people. The next day I visited my office. There was already a floral arrangement on my desk. White orchids, his favorite. No note. But I didn't need one. My assistant peeked in a few minutes later. There's someone downstairs, she said carefully. He didn't give his name. But he said he just wants 5 minutes. I stood slowly. No. You don't want to hear him out? No, I repeated. I already did. For years. And now he's trying to turn public regret into a redemption arc. He doesn't want to apologize. He wants to be seen apologizing. She nodded, relieved. I'll have security escort him out. I returned to my desk and opened a new file, one titled The Safe House Project, our latest initiative to fund emergency shelter for women exiting abusive relationships. Real recovery. Real impact. Not headlines. That night, Ethan found me on the couch, curled in a blanket, laptop on my lap. Need anything? He asked. I looked up. Actually, yes. He raised an eyebrow. Name it. I reached out for his hand. Just stay. He sat down beside me without another word and pulled me into his side. You did the right thing, he said quietly. I know, I whispered. But sometimes doing the right thing still feels heavy. That's why I'm here, he replied. To carry some of it with you. I closed the laptop. And for the first time since the letter leaked, I stopped thinking about what Logan needed me to feel. Because in this space, in this home, in these arms, I finally felt free. Closure isn't always about forgiveness. Sometimes it's about standing in a room filled with the same people who once watched you fall, and letting them see how high you've risen since. That's what the Reclaim Gala was for. The first official event hosted by the Safe House Project, our flagship foundation for women rebuilding after betrayal, violence, or loss. It was to be elegant, powerful, unforgettable. Just like the women it was meant to serve. The guest list was curated with precision. Key donors, female CEOs, former clients turned mentors. And yes, even a few people from my past. Because I wanted them to see me. Not as a victim. As a force. I stood in the event hall days before the gala, clipboard in hand, watching the chandeliers being lowered for cleaning, the table settings rehearsed with surgical elegance. Ethan came up behind me, tucking a folded envelope into my palm. What's this? One more invite, he said, unreadable. I opened it. Logan Pierce. I looked up at him, silent. Ethan was calm, but his jaw tightened. It was already circulating that we didn't invite him. People would have said you were afraid of him or still bitter. I understood. And now they'll say what? That you've moved so far past him, you can afford to be gracious. I considered it. Then nodded. Fine. Send it. 2 nights later, the Reclaim Gala shimmered like a dream. I wore crimson this time. Not white. Red, the color of power. Of blood. Of rebirth. A signal to every woman in that room that we do not start over in silence. We return louder, brighter, and stronger. Ethan, in a classic black suit, stood at my side, his hand on my back, his presence quiet but undeniable. And then, almost as if summoned by some cosmic cue, I saw him. Logan. Standing alone near the bar in a navy suit that didn't quite fit like it used to. Not enough shine in the cufflinks. No more entourage at his heels. He looked ordinary. And maybe for the first time in his life he felt it. He made eye contact across the room. I didn't blink. I nodded once, politely. Then I turned back to greet a donor and carried on. Later, when the speeches ended and the music swelled softly, he found me near the balcony doors. "Savannah," he said quietly. "Logan," I answered. He gestured toward the night sky. "Hey, I allowed it. Not because I owed him anything, but because I had nothing left to fear." We stepped outside. The city lights blinked below, the air thick with summer and symmetry. "This is beautiful," he murmured. I looked over the balcony railing. "It is." He hesitated. "Why did you invite me?" I met his eyes. "Because I wanted you to see what I built out of what you broke." He flinched but didn't deny it. "I meant what I wrote in that letter," he said. "Even if no one believes me." I nodded. "I believe you. That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "That it doesn't matter anymore." His eyes searched mine, desperate. "Do you ever miss it? Us?" I didn't even hesitate. "No. Because it was never truly us. It was me giving, you taking, and both of us mistaking that for love." He looked down, ashamed. "You're not a villain, Logan," I said. "You're just not the hero of my story anymore." He swallowed hard. "I didn't think you'd ever let me go." "I didn't either," I admitted. "But sometimes, letting go is the bravest thing we can do." When I returned to the ballroom, Ethan was waiting at the base of the stairs, holding a glass of champagne. "You okay?" he asked, watching me closely. "Yes," I said. "Better than okay." He handed me the glass. "You didn't have to talk to him." "I know," I replied, smiling. "But I wanted him to see what real peace looks like." Ethan nodded, pulling me close. "He's never going to forget this night." "Good," I said, resting my head on his shoulder. "Because I plan to." That night, as the final guests left and the gala wrapped in laughter and light, I stood alone for a moment in the middle of the ballroom, barefoot, tired, heart full. Ethan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I looked around the room that had once been a dream and now stood as proof that this is exactly where I was always meant to be, and that I had to lose everything to find it. Legacies aren't always inherited. Some are chosen, built, rewritten from ashes. I stood on the second floor of the Safe House Project's first permanent residence, a sprawling 5-story brick building in downtown Southbridge, once a forgotten relic, now fully restored and glowing with promise. The elevator doors opened behind me. Ethan stepped out, his jacket slung over one shoulder, 2 coffees in hand. "One for the woman who just got approved for phase 2, he said with a grin, handing me the cup. I laughed, taking it. "I can't believe it's happening." "I can," he said, brushing a kiss against my temple. "You were always meant for more than someone else's shadow." By now, the foundation had helped over 100 women. We'd expanded into legal clinics, financial literacy workshops, and emergency housing grants. We'd hired therapists, lawyers, architects, every role filled by women once overlooked, just like I had been. I wasn't just healing. I was creating a world where others wouldn't have to break first. And Ethan? He was the silent power at my side. He never tried to outshine me, he simply made sure the lights never went out. The first time someone called me Mrs. Carter in public, I didn't flinch. But I didn't glow either. It wasn't the name that gave me power. It was the choice I made to wear it, on my terms. 3 months after the Reclaim Gala, I received a letter. No press this time. No performance. Just a quiet envelope delivered to my office, marked with Logan's handwriting. I hesitated. Ethan happened to be there, reviewing a proposal across the table. "Do you want me to read it first?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's okay." I opened it. "Savannah, this isn't for anyone else's eyes. It's not a grand apology or a final shot at getting you back. I know that door is closed, and I finally understand why. You didn't just stop loving me. You stopped needing me. And that's what broke me. It was never about the money or the title or the humiliation. It was the realization that you found peace in a world where I don't exist." I wanted to hate Ethan. But watching how he stands beside you, how he protects your silence, I couldn't. You were never mine to begin with. You were just surviving beside me. And I mistook your endurance for love. You were always going to become this version of yourself. I just wasn't meant to be the man beside you when you did. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know. I finally see it now. Goodbye, Logan. I stared at the final line for a long time. It was the first message I'd received from him that didn't ask for something. Didn't beg. Didn't guilt. Didn't promise. Just acknowledged. Finally, I exhaled and folded the letter. Then I slid it into the drawer of my desk and locked it away, not out of sentiment but because it was the last thing I ever needed from him. A clean ending. That evening, Ethan found me outside on the villa balcony, barefoot, sipping tea. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said honestly. "It's done." He didn't ask what was in the letter. He didn't need to. Instead, he handed me a thick folder and said, "I think it's time you looked at this." I opened it and blinked. Blueprints. Site maps. Investment proposals. The safe house expansion? "Not just that," he said. "I bought the old West Grove University campus. We're going to turn it into something permanent. A women's leadership institute. Under your name." I turned to him, stunned. "Ethan." He smiled softly. "You've helped women survive. Now it's time to help them lead." My eyes burned, not with tears but with something deeper. Belonging. Purpose. Love without expectation. I leaned forward, cradling his face in my hands. "You're not the man I dreamed of as a girl," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You're better. Because you waited for the woman I was meant to become." That night we lay in bed, the windows open, the breeze gentle, the silence easy. "Savannah," he murmured, half asleep. "Yes. If we have a daughter one day, what will you tell her about all this?" I smiled, tracing his knuckles with my thumb. "I'll tell her that loving someone is never the mistake. But forgetting your worth to keep them? That is." 5 years later. The sun hung low over the South Bridge skyline, casting golden light across the newly finished facade of the Blake Carter Institute for Women's Leadership. It had taken years of planning, a village of support and a lifetime of pain transformed into purpose. But the dream had finally taken shape in steel, stone and sunlight. I stood just outside the ceremonial ribbon, wearing a simple cream dress that fluttered gently in the breeze, my hand resting on the subtle curve of my belly. "It's our baby, Ethan's. You look like a goddess," Ethan whispered as he joined me on the podium, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I laughed softly, still getting used to how naturally he made worship feel like breathing. "And you look like a very proud husband," I murmured back. "I am a very proud husband," he said, slipping his arm around me as we faced the crowd. The press stood with cameras raised, donors in neat rows, foundation alumni in tailored blazers, and scattered among them the women we'd once sheltered, now thriving in law school, starting businesses, running programs of their own. At the front, a large sign read, "For every woman who was ever told she had to shrink to be loved, grow anyway." It was a quote from a speech I'd given 2 years ago. Ethan had insisted it be carved into the courtyard wall. When I stepped up to the microphone, the applause was warm, immediate. But when Ethan joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind, resting his hands gently over the slight swell of my belly, the cheers turned thunderous. I blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. 5 years ago, I began, I was preparing for a wedding I thought would define my life. A hush fell over the crowd. And in a way, it did. Just not the way I imagined. Because what I walked away from that day was not just a man. It was the version of myself who thought endurance was love, silence was strength, and pain was part of the price. I looked back at Ethan, who smiled at me like I was everything he'd waited his entire life to find. But what I found instead, I continued, was a love that didn't ask me to shrink. A partner who stood beside me, not in front. A future that didn't hurt. The crowd clapped again, but my eyes found one figure near the back, partially hidden behind a column. Logan. He wasn't part of the guest list. But I had a feeling he'd come. Dressed in a simple dark blazer, he stood quietly, not making a scene. No cameras turned to him. He wasn't trying to be seen. He was just there. Watching. And when our eyes met across the distance, he didn't look bitter. He looked peaceful. He nodded once. And I returned it. That was all. He didn't stay long. Just enough to witness what he'd once destroyed now fully rebuilt, and better. As he turned and walked away, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I just felt done. Back inside the event hall, after the formalities ended, Ethan pulled me into the far corner of the garden where the noise faded into birdsong. He leaned against the stone railing, pulling me between his legs, his hands resting protectively on my waist. Do you remember, he said, brushing his lips against my hair, the first time you told me you felt safe? I smiled, chin resting against his chest. Of course. I was crying into your shoulder after turning down an investor who once hit on me in front of a boardroom. He laughed. You didn't just turn him down. You ripped him to shreds with 4 sentences. And you just handed me a tissue and said, you want me to ruin him financially or just emotionally? He grinned. I've got range. I laughed. I married a dangerous man. He dipped his head to kiss the tip of my nose. You married a man who's dangerous only for you. Everyone else gets polite and professional. You get the fire. My heart swelled in my chest. You've given me everything, I whispered. A home. A mission. A child. He looked down at my stomach, wonder softening his face like he still couldn't believe it. I never thought, he murmured, that someone like you could be mine. And I never thought love could feel like this, I said. No chasing. No proving. Just being. That night as we lay in bed, his hand resting over the curve of our unborn child, I watched the shadows on the ceiling shift with the breeze. What if she's like me? I asked softly. Ethan didn't hesitate. Then she'll be unstoppable. I turned into him, pressing my face into his chest, overcome with quiet emotion. And what if she's like you? I asked. He kissed my forehead. Then she'll never let anyone forget her worth. We lay in silence for a long time. Eventually he whispered, You've changed the ending. I looked up at him. What do you mean? You were supposed to be the woman who got left behind. The one who stayed quiet. Who got replaced. He cupped my face gently. But instead, you became the woman everyone else had to rise to meet. The book. A year later, the day our daughter was born, the first thing I said, through tears, laughter, and sweat, was, Don't name her after anyone. She's going to make her own name. Ethan just held her close and said, Welcome to the world, baby girl. Your mom's going to teach you how to burn down anything that tries to cage you. And in that moment, amid the glow of a quiet hospital room, the quiet rhythm of my daughter's breaths and the fierce, unwavering love of the man beside me, I realized, this wasn't just the life I rebuilt. This was the life I chose. The end.